Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to take all the information that we've kind of seen so far relating to all our different standards and dimensioning protocol, and we're going to apply it to a kind of a sample project. So like the project you're working on yourselves, this is going to be a stool project. So here we have the stool in question. It's a small sugan or reed woven top stool like that. So basic enough shape. We have just kind of these square legs like so. We're going to have rungs going into them, which I'm going to make circular runs, so maybe turned pieces. And then we have these mortise and tenon rails here along the bottom, like so. So basically just three parts, but we're going to just walk you through the process of creating the working drawing, so that you essentially you know exactly what you need to do for your own project. I'm just going to have a look at the project itself real quick. So here is just the SolidWorks image of that. So we can just look at exactly how the piece itself is constructed. We can just do a little quick section. So a section is literally just slicing through the piece so we can see inside it. And you can see, let's see if we do it there, we can see the rungs themselves, a cylinder like that, and they stop inside the piece. We can see as well our rails here like that are going to be just straight through mortise and tenon, and there's no haunch of that. They're just going to go straight. And so as simple a project as you possibly could have, um, but just enough for us to kind of get an idea of how our working drawings come together. So that's an idea of what we're looking at. Let's just look and walk through the process of creating the working drawing for that. So I'm going to begin by just say our first example here, where you're going to start creating our parts drawing. So here we can see we have the actual plan, elevation, and end view for each of our three different parts. You can see we have each of our key components. We have our title over each part. We have the page sectioned off, so we're not getting confused between which view belongs to what. We have the elevation plan, each of them labeled like so, and we have our hidden detail drawn in. Now I've left enough room here on around my different objects to put in my dimensions afterwards. When you're creating your plan, elevation, and view, you must make sure you have enough space to place your dimensions afterwards. It's very common that some students will put things a bit too close together like that, or maybe to save a bit of space on the page, and you don't have space for your dimensions, so you end up squeezing everything in, which makes the drawing quite messy and makes the drawing quite hard to read. So that's just one tip for you. You can see as well with our parts page here, we have our regular title, like so. So we have our page bordered, we have our title block, our standard title block that we've been using. We have our company title, so in our case, GMIT letter frac. You have your own name, you have the date, you have the scale of the drawing. Now, I just mentioned about the scale of the drawing. If all the parts are the same scale, you can just include one single scale here like that. So in this case, it's half scale, so 1:2. If the individual parts are scaled differently, so maybe you might have a longer leg, maybe this is a very small part, you might double the size of this, whereas you're halving the size of this. What you'll do is you'll put in the individual scale at the title here. So that would be, if this was doubled, we would say seat rungs, 2:1. If this was legs here, if it was 1:2, you wouldn't need to put anything there. 1:2 is already referencing that. Um, when it comes to picking your scale, really what you're trying to do is trying to keep the object as large as possible, so that the dimensions and everything is going to be as clear. You don't want to try and shrink these down too much, but you should be trying to keep to a standard scale. So a standard scale would be something like 1:1, 1:2, 1:4, 1:10, or 1:5. Would be kind of all standard scales. If you're trying to increase the size of something, 2:1 would be doubling it, say, and so on. You can see as well actually with the titles, I've made a little mistake here. You can see the titles should, and all writing in your actual image or in your drawing should be capital letters. So technically this here should be seat rungs like so. And it's just standard protocol when it comes to um, putting in our drawings like so. So it's seat rungs like that. So we have our drawing here that we have our page 1 of 2. So in this case I have 2 pages, so I just put page 1 of 2, so that if you were working in a say a design setting, if you were handing some of the drawings, if there was 3 sheets and one of them went missing, at least they'd know. They could say, well, I have page 1 of 3, I have page 3 of 3, but I must be missing page 2 of 3. So that way, it just make sure there's no mistakes made afterwards. So this is just a very, very initial thing. So that this isn't in any way finished. We're going to go on then to what it would look like finished. So here we can see this is kind of up then from that. You can see here we have our dimensions put on the piece. But more importantly, before we go for the dimensions, we put in our center marks and our center lines. So there's our center mark. For anywhere we see our circular shape of that, we put in our center mark, and you can see we have a center line for the corresponding image of that. So there's our center line there, and down in our plan view here, we have our center line like so. So they should be following through from one view. So there's a center mark, there's a center line there, center line there. Same thing applies. There's my center mark for the circular hole there. I come from this side. There's our center line then, and then there's our center line down here in our plan view. So it's something that I find students tend to forget about the center lines because it's not an edge that you see. They tend to leave them out, but just make sure you don't do that. So center marks and all our kind of standards apply. Our center line, long dash, short dash, and extending out past the piece. You can see the piece, the feature stops here, so it just extends past that. It's far enough away from this edge here, so we wouldn't continue it out to the very edge. Same way with our center mark, just continuing out past the edge there, like so. You can see our dimensioning standards then with our kind of long, thin arrowhead like so. We can see the text placement sitting upright or to the left-hand side of the piece. Wherever we have, say, the likes of a hole that's to be drilled, we're putting in our diameter rather than our radius like so. And like all the tips that we had given in our previous videos about how to dimension, what's important about our dimensioning, would apply here like so. You can see as well, say, where we have, say, small dimensions, here we have our two little dots, where the 16, where you couldn't fit the actual figure inside it, we would be having the arrow coming from the outside. And like, it's very easy to do it within SolidWorks. You can just click on the actual piece itself, and you can actually just reverse the actual arrowheads like that. You can see here we have our 30 like so. The 10 is too small to fit the arrows, so we use the arrows from either side there like so. And same with our 16 like that. So I'm not going to go into minute detail about the dimensioning, but you can see we have all our key dimensions, our 40 by 40 here, our overall height here like that, and all our dimensions for all our various pieces located where we see the contours. So you can see here's the contour of our hole here like that, down our 41, so that's where we would do it, as opposed to putting our 41 here like so. So all the little tips. It's the same for each of our pieces, same things apply. You'll also see as well that I have a number in front of each of my parts here, the labeling for that. We're going to use those numbers in our bill of materials later on. So seat rung 1, number 1 here is a reference number for seat rung like that, number 3 for bottom rails, number 2 for legs like so. We also have, say, a detail view for any feature that might be a little bit too small to actually dimension properly, like say, for example, the chamfer. We have a detail view. So a detail view is just a magnified view where we just draw a circle around the feature that we want to magnify, and we just draw in our feature here larger. So in this case here, the scale of the actual main drawing is half scale. So here is the scale 1:1 for our actual chamfer. And you can see I've dimensioned 5:5 for the chamfer because we'll be doing it by hand. You can see how it's referenced as well. There's our detail A like that. So we have an A around our circle like so. And we have detail A then, and we have the scale 1:1 for it. So that's properly referenced as as it should be there. Anything else then with the rest of the piece? Not really there. Like, in all our dimensioning, and that applies to our pieces here, like so. And we labeling the same way all throughout. The little symbol here, you might be wondering about what that symbol there references is first angle projection. First angle projection is how we lay out our different views, and this is the international symbol for first angle, which is the international way to lay it out. And we know from our drawings that if we're looking from above, what we see will appear below the object. If we look from the left, what we see will appear on the right. In America, they use the ANSI system, and they use what's known as third angle projection. So the symbol for that is actually the same symbol, but it's reversed around. This will be on the far side. So to avoid any confusion, we reference this here, and we'll give an indication. We'll actually put up on Learn Online the dimensions for that, so you'll be able to draw that on your own piece. Aside from that, that is our main part drawings. Now we'll have a look at the assembly drawings. So within the assembly drawings here, we can see here is our main assembly. You don't, in our drawing here, have to include an isometric view. I've just included that just to kind of make things a little bit clearer. When you're doing it in CAD, and SolidWorks, it's very, very easy. Because you're doing your first project by hand, we won't require an isometric view. So we've taken that out of the extra requirements. But generally speaking, when you're doing a working drawing, it is a good idea to include an isometric view, or often isometric views of individual joints, just to help the actual reader make sense of the drawings themselves. So looking at the requirements for our assembly drawing, here we have again elevation, our plan, and our this is a sectional view, so it's not just an end view, it's a sectional end view. We'll talk about that in a second. But all we need on this here is similar to our part drawings. We have our main pieces, we have our hidden detail, we have our center lines marking out the center marks and the center lines for our turn pieces and for any of the holes. So there it is there in our plan view like so. I've also got my center line here like that, just indicating that the whole piece is symmetrical like that. Regarding dimensions, we don't need to dimension the entire thing because we already have our parts dimensioned in our part drawings. So all we need to do is give the overall dimensions here for the piece. So we've given the overall height, the overall width, and the overall depth of the piece. Like so. We've also included, say, sectional or sorry, detail views anywhere we have particular interest to note. So here is a detail F, detail G, and detail D here, and we can see there are the detail views of the various kind of features. So that's just a closer look of the actual joint there. So something might be of interest to the actual person making it. Detail F, detail G, again the scale and the actual title on it. And here we have a sectional detail showing the actual mortise and tenon joint. So it's a sectional detail, and we have a video on sections specifically as well. But basically, a sectional detail is where you slice through the piece so you can see the actual feature without having it in hidden detail like what we have here. There's a couple of other things just to notice with this as well. We also have our balloon referencing. So a balloon referencing basically is just identifying the part within the assembly. So we have just a circle like that, number one, and then a leader line leading to the piece. And if the leader line meets inside a surface, so inside the piece, it's a dot. If it meets an edge, it's going to be an arrow, just a small little thing just to note like that. So 1, 2, and 3, and those balloon referencing there relates back to our parts here, where we have 1, 2, and 3 like that. So that's where that reference number comes in. So that's the reference number linking back to the part, and it also links down here into our bill of materials. So it's a reference number or item number. So item number 1, 2, and 3. So we know exactly which um, piece we're talking about. So here we have the item number, the part name, so stool, rung, leg, and rail. We have the material, we have our quantity, so you'll need 4 of each of them, and then we have our finished size, so length by breadth by height. So we, for each individual piece. So that's our bill of materials. So it's basically our referencing for each individual piece, and it's something that when someone looks at the pieces, well, what size do they need to, is the overall piece. So when they're going cutting out the stock, they'll know what size it must meet. They'll know how many of them are, and so on and so forth. You also have included here any additional notes. So in this case here, we have notes saying the seat base is woven seagrass, just to let you know what the weave here is, and all parts are to be finished with beeswax finish before assembly. So that might be important if you're spraying it, that you might spray it beforehand. Or any other notes, if there was going to be a piece that you're going to be applying to it, if there was a handle or something going to be applied, or maybe you have a top here which you're going to use some marquetry, so you might just reference here that the panel is going to be MDF with maybe a veneer, a marquetry veneer on top of it, and you could then reference them to an image showing your actual layout for the marquetry. Um, what else have we got? Well, here we have our sectional drawing here. So a sectional drawing is basically our piece here with a slice taken through it. If we go back here to our 3D, this here is our section. When we do that, a section is basically cutting through the piece so you can actually see inside it. So instead of looking at hidden detail, we're actually cutting away a portion of the piece to reveal what it looks like inside at a certain section. How we reference that is through this line here, which is basically a center line with thickened ends. So we have a center line slicing through the piece here, identifying where it's been cut. So it's been cut right through this leg here. We have our arrows indicating the viewing direction, and then we have B here, or it could be AA or XX, just referencing in case you have more than one section, so you know exactly which section where it actually comes from. So in this case, it's section BB. So center line, we thicken the ends, We have our arrows like that, and then we have our letters there indicating it. And then here we have the result of that, section BB, and we have our section completed. So that is our piece. We can see no hidden detail, but we can see inside the piece. So that is our rail there like that entering into the piece. We can see it's stopped clearly. We can see that the rung here is stopped. So it makes it a bit easier to see what the actual joints look like, that we actually have our X-ray vision essentially. You can see as well in the section it should be correctly hatched. So hatching is this pattern that we see here, and basically each piece here should have a different type of hatch pattern. So this one here is a 45-degree line going in this direction. This one here goes in the opposite direction. And you can change around the spacing of the actual um, hatching, or you, instead of having a single line here, you could have a double line there like that, or this could be a double line here compared to up here like that. But basically each piece should have its own identifiable hatch pattern. And that's pretty much all the kind of key components that we're requiring here. Our bill of materials, key dimensions, our balloon referencing, we have our sectional view, and we have our detail views. Again, always make sure you're keeping, close eye on the hidden detail and the likes of your center lines as well. And aside from that, there's our symbol there for our first angle, and there's our border and our title block. Again, our title, your name, the date, scale like that. So again, scale 1 is to 2, and then page 2 of 2. And that is our, I suppose, sample stool project. So you can see our working drawings, our part drawings, and our assembly drawings. Now there's a nice bit of drawing in it, particularly when you're doing it by hand, but it really is a great exercise to help you get to know the piece that you're making as well beforehand. I mean, by the time you have this drawn, you really will be familiar with the piece. So when it comes to going down to the benchroom and making it, you hopefully will have spotted any little kinks or any little questions like over dimensions or how something is going to be jointed. All that will have been worked out or have to be worked out for you to create your actual working drawing. So that's hopefully going to be a help to you. I mean, if nothing, maybe a bit of a guide to you. So like I always say, if you have any questions, please send me an email or please just mention it in class. Okay, so best of luck and happy drawing.